You know what Netflix accidentally became? Not a streaming service, not a tech company, not even a content platform. Netflix accidentally became that weird little video store from 1997, run by a man named Trevor who smelled vaguely like clove cigarettes and judged you spiritually for renting action movies. 20 years ago, if you wanted to rent an Indonesian horror movie, you needed connections. You needed Trevor. Trevor worked behind the counter of an independent video store with terrible lighting and one aggressively curated Criterion shelf that he guarded like a wizard protecting forbidden knowledge. He wore fingerless gloves in July. Nobody knew why, and nobody was brave enough to ask him. Every conversation with Trevor ended with him saying, "The Korean version is better." Now, you can accidentally discover some deeply unsettling horror film from halfway around the world while eating leftover chicken at 11:30 at night because Netflix autoplayed something with a screaming woman and a cursed child in the thumbnail, which is how I ended up watching The Elixir. And within about 15 minutes, I realized something important. American zombie stories and international zombie stories are no longer afraid of the same thing. This is Cold Cuts. I'm Tony Serecchia. Short essays about storytelling, creativity, horror, technology, and the strange systems we keep building around ourselves. Today, I'm talking about international horror and zombie movies and why some of the best modern horror no longer comes out of Hollywood. American zombie fiction has evolved into infrastructure horror. That's really what it is now. We worry about systems collapsing, supply chains, government failure, prepper fantasies, ammo counts, water filtration, that one guy with a tactical backpack who secretly wants civilization to fail just so he can finally explain iodine tablets to his neighbor. Even my own zombie fiction leans in that direction. My techno-horror story, The Skin Man, basically takes place after society has already started eating itself, and the reanimates show up just in time for the buffet. American zombie stories are logistical. International horror still treats the undead like a curse, and that's a very different emotional engine. The Elixir doesn't feel polished in the modern Hollywood sense. It feels sweaty, uneasy, personal, like the movie itself is running a fever. And I mean that as a compliment. Honestly, this may be my favorite zombie movie in years, though, I want to add, nothing I've seen recently touches Train to Busan, which is probably still the modern gold standard for zombie horror. But The Elixir understands something fundamental. Human beings cannot resist trying to cheat death. Every civilization eventually produces somebody who looks at mortality and says, "What if we disrupted this?" The ancient alchemists tried it with mysticism. Victorian scientists tried it with electricity. Silicon Valley billionaires are currently trying it with supplements, blood transfusions, cryogenic freezing, and whatever terrifying powdered mushroom compound Joe Rogan's guests are selling this week. We keep reinventing the same bad idea with different branding. The Philosopher's Stone, the Fountain of Youth, cryonics, biohacking. At one point, Silicon Valley briefly convinced itself immortality might somehow involve purchasing a haunted JPEG. And every generation eventually rediscovers the same horrifying truth. The line between medicine and curse is just dosage and marketing. Also, The Elixir is gloriously gross. Not prestige horror gross, not symbolic trauma gross. I mean, horror fans are grinning while normal people are reconsidering their movie choices gross. There's even a wonderfully nasty little nod to Bicycle Girl from the Walking Dead pilot. And the body horror works because your body already feels vaguely unreliable, especially after 40. By middle age, every human being wakes up making at least one sound associated with an old wooden ship settling during a storm. Aging is already cosmic horror. which is why immortality stories keep working. And international horror often plays this completely straight. Hollywood cushions terror with irony now. Everybody quips. Every third character talks like they know they're inside a franchise. Half of modern dialogue feels engineered specifically for trailers and reaction GIFs. But the Elixir has moments that feel generally uncomfortable in the way older horror movies used to be. Not elevated horror, not prestige horror, just oh no horror. Something has gone catastrophically wrong, and these people are emotionally unequipped to deal with it. Not unlike the Windows 11 rollout. And there's another thing international horror often understands better than American horror. American zombie fiction starts with societal collapse. International horror, much like Thanksgiving disasters, often start with family. Obligation, tradition, shame, community pressure. The fear that the people closest to you might drag you directly into horror because they desperately need to believe something impossible. Which, honestly, explains a surprising amount for the last decade. A deeply concerning number of people will absolutely consume mystery supplements recommended by a podcast host standing beside an elk carcass. The older I get, the more I think that horror survives by migration. The genre has to travel, country to country, culture to culture. Otherwise, it gets trapped inside its own habits. American zombie fiction gave us George A. Romero, then The Walking Dead, then approximately 4,000 scenes of emotionally damaged survivors reinventing feudalism beside abandoned propane tanks. Now the horror is mutating again. Korean horror, Indonesian horror, Spanish horror, folk horror, tech horror. Small, weird movies made by people who still seem generally interested in scaring you instead of building a 10-year cinematic roadmap. And somehow, Netflix accidentally became the world's weirdest horror aisle, which might honestly be the best thing streaming ever gave us. Not infinite content, but new nightmares. Because eventually, every culture invents its own version of the same bad idea. Cheating death. And horror exists largely to remind us this tends to end poorly. The Elixir is currently streaming on Netflix. 5 undead out of 5, highly recommended. If you enjoy essays about horror, storytelling, creativity, and the strange intersection of culture and technology, consider subscribing to Cold Cuts. You can find it at TonySerecchia.com. I'm Tony Serecchia, and remember, if a mysterious glowing liquid promises eternal life, maybe let somebody else try it first.